guys, AMICUSTOMS here. Coming at you with a video that will kind of help you understand if a sub that you're about to purchase is in good working order, or if one of your own woofers that you actually have that you're thinking about selling is actually still a good working sub. But I'll show you on this one. This was a local guy here that a lot of people know as Small Mike. He bought this 18. This is an HEC3 SOUNDQUBED 18 with the carbon dust cap, which this sub appeared to be working fine. It appeared to play. Didn't really have any mechanical noise to it that anybody could tell. But this actually has a failed triple joint, which is a very common problem, like I said, that I see with a lot of different woofers. So I'll show you how you would examine a sub upon getting it to make sure that it's in good working order. So first thing you want to do is actually just push on the cap and listen. So right away you can hear a faint clicking sound is what it sounds like. So that immediately should tell you as a buyer or even as the seller that there's something wrong with the sub, either mechanically or the coil may be rubbing. There's a bunch of different things that can go wrong with any subwoofer, but how you inspect what exactly is causing the issue, sometimes you actually have to cut it all the way out, and we'll cut this one out so you can see up close what's really wrong with this woofer. But this one's kind of easy to spot, the failed triple joint. So what you'll do first is look at the top to see if the cone is connected all the way around, which this one looks okay. You can get in here, like you got to get up underneath and look at this suspension. So as we push down, you can see where it's tore away from the former, which is the coil part. And you can see as I push up on it, you can see where that's not connected at all. And that's what's called a ripped or torn triple joint. Now what that does is, so I can show you on, this is a bottom half assembly for an HEC4, but very similar to this same model woofer here, the HEC3. So as the sub starts to move, so as you can visualize here, the suspension is going to move up and down. So there's a lot of stress right here at this point. This is called your triple joint. So at this point here, if the woofer actually starts to, if it pushes past its mechanical limits, one way or the other, either in the outstroke or the downward stroke, it will tear at this joint. So if you see it tear at the top, it's usually because it over excursion down. You see it tear at the bottom, it's usually because it over excursioned out. So I'll go over what can cause those different types of failures, but this is a clear case of what I would say is an over excursion sub. It was either played below box tuning with too much power behind it. There's different scenarios where, say, the box is oriented in such a way and then you're playing it with a very heavy bass note, and then somebody opens a door that causes a pressure differential change inside the cabin, which causes the woofer to over excursion. Before you know it, you ripped a triple joint. Now again, I'll use this, I guess, as a demonstration. So ideally, when the sub is playing, you want it to go straight out, straight in. So it needs to be extremely linear when it's moving in and out. So if either side of the joint, the top or the bottom, becomes broke, the sub can get what's called coil rock. So as it starts to move up and down, it will slide from side to side like this. It's not that extreme, but I'm just using that as a demonstration. So in this particular instance, as that starts to fail more and that joint starts to rip more all the way around and start to rip up to the next layer of suspension, that coil will start to get what's called non-linear, and it will start to actually rub the inside part of the magnet. And then eventually the coil will fail altogether because it'll create friction, creates heat, and then it will just fail completely. So this sub still works, still plays, but it has issues. So it has issues that's going to shorten the life of this sub. This sub may last a couple weeks, may last a day. It just really depends on the application. The guy who's using it, he's going to put a pretty healthy amount of power to the sub, and it's going to be in an up-fire condition where there's quite a bit of space above the cone. So it's going to hit full X-max, which is going to cause the sub to have greater risk of further ripping itself apart even more. And then once your sub fails, and no one's happy with that, so we want to try and avoid that. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and cut this sub out, and I'll show you kind of the process I do. We'll go real quick. And so the first thing, I'm just going to take the gasket off all the way around. And we'll reuse that because there's nothing wrong with it, so we'll just kind of set it over to the side. The carbon cone, or the carbon dust cap on top, we will definitely reuse this. So I have another video that shows how to remove these. It's pretty easy. With this being a paper cone, it's a lot easier to pull this cap off. If this was a carbon cone, it's a little bit more delicate operation because, as you can see here, this is a carbon cone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a lot of pressure on the paper cone to relieve that. But if it was carbon, you can't really put a lot of pressure on it because it's carbon. So you actually have to get a very thin blade, like a razor knife, and actually get it between the carbon cone and the dust cap and cut it off that way. But you can see, I mean, it doesn't take a lot of pressure. You can see it already starting to move. And this is just I want to say it's like a panel popper tool or something I had in my toolbox. I've had this thing for years. It's just a plastic, real hard plastic piece. And all I'm trying to do is just find a spot where it's weak enough where I can get the tool up underneath it. And I'm putting a lot of pressure on this part. Not putting a lot on this. I know it looks like it's flexing a lot, but I'm putting more pressure on the cone itself and not on the dust cap. And see, once you get it where you can get this under it, you can usually get a hand and then just pull up on that cap and it'll pop right off. And then this glue just peels off all the way around. So that's pretty easy to clean up. So we'll go ahead and cut this thing. And then I use a pair of side cutters just to kind of cut the and this particular stub is actually going to be reconed with a carbon cone. So that will be here tomorrow, and we'll shoot a separate video on that, and I'll show the recone process, since it'll be just like this, where you have the soft parts, the coil, and the suspension all separate, and then the cone attaches to it. So, and it'll be a carbon cone, so we'll shoot a little video of that and show you guys how that works out. So if you fold the cone up, it makes it a little bit easier to get to the suspension to cut it out. Which, if you had a carbon cone, this is quite a pain in the butt to do. Which I've reconed a couple of my carbon cones, and you have to take a very long blade, like a knife, like a steak knife, and cut it from up here at the top of the basket. It takes quite a while to do.
Is that what has happened to my steak knives? I have 2 of them missing.
No, that's what happened to one of them. I don't know where the other one is.
Mm-hmm.
So this one failed all the way around because that bottom layer of suspension isn't wanting to come out. Normally, when you cut this, you'll be able to cut it to where both layers will come out at the same time. Alright, so we'll go ahead and move this out of the way because we're done with this. And one other thing too, we didn't hear any coil rub when I was pushing on it, so there's no motor shift issue or anything like that. If someone's thinking that through their head right now, that maybe there's a problem with the motor, that's why that tore up. No, that's not what happened. So as you can see, this is supposed to be glued way up here. And you can see where that glue joint busted loose all the way around. And that's not because of a bad glue joint. The glue wasn't applied properly. There was too much activator added to the CA glue. That's not what caused this joint to fail. What caused this joint to fail is strictly overexcursion. This suspension got maxed out past its mechanical limits. That's how that failed. That's how 99.9% of all of these type of failures like this in any brand of these drivers fails. I mean, if you look at this coil, There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It never even got hot. This discoloration down here, that's normal. That's just the lacquer or the resin in the coil burning in. It will slightly discolor, but if this coil had ever gotten hot, it'd be completely black. There's no separation or anything. On the inside of the coil, the former, what we look for is if this is bubbled at all. That's called a delaminated coil. That's another common issue that you see with subwoofers. People overdriving them, getting them too hot. The coil actually gases, and the form will actually sink in and then start to rub the pole vent. You'll hear a clicking sound when the sub plays. So as you can see here, the top layer of the suspension. So when SOUNDQUBED glues these in, when they're made, it's glued on both sides. So it's glued at the top and it's glued here at the bottom. So you can see this top layer of suspension did not fail. It's still completely glued in all the way around. Okay? It's that secondary layer that failed due to overexcursion. So eventually, because that would lose the stiffness, and with this just flopping around in there, not connected, it would cause this sub to be pushed or pulled in one way or the other, and eventually this coil would start to see damage, and then it would start to rip other parts of this sub apart. So that's how you inspect one of these things, and I hope that answers a couple questions that I see posted all the time online. I see people asking about this stuff all the time, so I figured I'd make a video since I had one here that had that specific failure point on it. So people ask, okay, well, how do we avoid this altogether? Let's say I don't understand how I need to play my subs. I don't know how I need to break them in. I don't know any of that stuff. I see other people say, oh, you don't got to break in subs. You don't have to do that. It's a myth. With a very stiff woofer, it is needed. I've played them straight out of the box full tilt, but it was because I had to. It was because I was at finals or some other issue, some other thing was going on. I had a show that very next day, or I blew it at the show and had to put another sub in there so I could try and win. And there's a bunch of different reasons why I've played them wide open straight out of the box. But if I can avoid it, I do, because I don't want to go through this issue of reconing. But if you ask, okay, what can I do? What is the option? So on the carbon cone woofers, what SOUNDQUBED started offering this year, and this is for team members at this point. I don't know if they're going to change that or what, but what they do is they do this what's called roping and glassing. So what they actually do is, this is the HUC4, but they also do it on the 3s. So on the former part here, they put what's called fiberglass mat, and it's glassed and attached and glued and physically bonded to the former, so now it has something to bite into, has a lot stronger joint point. And then what they do is they also take a very fine, very strong string that's glued in there with it, and that's what they're doing when they're saying roping and glassing. And it's done on the bottom side, so you can actually see the fiberglass mat fibers here, and then there's the actual rope right in there. You can see the rope that's right there, and then the fiberglass mat, and then they also do it on the top side as well too. So you can see the rope, and then the fiberglass mat. Now, different companies, different manufacturers do different things that are very similar to that. So everybody has a different way of solving triple joint issues. This is a very sound and strong solution for triple joint failure problems. I can count on maybe one hand of the dozens of subs I've blown in the last 6-7 years that have failed from a roped and glass triple joint. And usually when those fail, it breaks something else a whole lot worse. Like I actually inverted one of these carbon cones because the whole entire suspension tried to rip off the basket, and then the coil actually stood on top of the pull piece. But other companies do like a PVC neck collar right there, but it's still all the same idea. So anyway, we'll do a recon video of that sub next, so you'll see that coming up after this video. And let me know if you guys have any questions. concerns. I'm sure there's all kinds of questions that go about reconing and sub failures and all those kinds of things that happen with woofers. So, but hope that addresses a common issue that I see with a lot of woofers. I see it with everything out there. So it's not just unique to SOUNDQUBED. It's a common problem that happens when you overdrive a sub, you unload it, those kinds of things. And if you're not familiar with the term unloading, that just means the woofer loses control. It can no longer control its spring effect inside the enclosure. So it's almost like it acts in free air. So, all right, guys, that's all I have. So let me know what you think. Thanks.